Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Lisa with Lisa Capen Quilts. Welcome to clue number 3 of the Mystery Quilt Sundae Stars. Y'all, we're paper piecing and we're getting busy this week. We are diving into some sewing, and up until now, clues 1 and 2 have been relatively light. And so if you're looking forward to some quality time at your sewing machine, welcome to week 3. If this is the very first video that you're joining in for this quilt series, there is a link to the playlist that brings you to all of the videos before this one. So you can start at the introduction video and work your way through and catch up to where we are. Do you want to see our progress so far? This week I thought it would be fun to pull it up on the screen so you can see it a little bit bigger. With clue number 3, this is where we are. This is how much we are filling in on our quilt after this week, right? Now, take a good look. Do you start to see some kind of diagonal lines forming that might be separating some blocks? We're working on the sashing pieces this week. So, after you're done with all of clue number 3 pieces, this is where we are with our quilt layout. And you can clearly start to see why I'm naming my quilt Sundae Stars. It kind of looks like a strawberry sundae, right? Or you know those ice creams on a stick, the strawberry shortcake ice creams? It kind of reminds me of that. But y'all are using all kinds of colors and you've been sharing your pictures over on the Creative Crew. It is so much fun to follow along and see what you're doing. See the fabrics and the colors that you've chosen. So thank you so much for sharing your progress with everybody. I think you inspire people more than you realize when you share your pictures. So thank you so much. Okay, everybody, are you ready to dive? Whoops, I hit the wrong button. Are you ready to dive into this week? Okay, let me take this off the screen. That's what I was trying to do. All right, let's go down to the pressing board and we're going to take a look at the PDF, and let me pull myself up on the screen because here I am. I was filming a totally different video and all my screens are all messed up. Okay, here we are. Focus, Lisa. Here is the first PDF for this week, right? And you do have the little progress snapshot right up here. It's just harder to see, right? So I thought I'd share it big this week. And this week we are using 2 colors of our fabric, right? We're using the background fabric, which for me is a really light cream color. It's a white fabric with a cream print. It's really hard to see on the printout. And we're using the brown. Now, depending on your printer and the screen, it might look a little red, but we're actually using brown fabric this week, okay? And actually my brown fabric has a lot of red in it. I think that's why it appears dark red on the computer screen or on the printout. So this week, y'all, we are making a total of 48 units. So that's why I said we're going to be sewing this week. But the good news is the units are small and we don't have to tape them together this week. So that's good news, right? So you have your instructions and your templates. If you like to pre-cut all your pieces like I do, then you have your templates here. Let's just walk through all the pieces you're going to cut for this week. Here's my little stacks. Okay, from the background fabric, we're going to be cutting 48 pieces using the C template. And to do that, to get the most use of your yardage, you could cut 3 strips of your background fabric at 2.5 inches wide, and from those 3 strips you will get your 48 pieces with just a smidgen left over, probably not even worth saving. Now from your brown template, you're gonna cut, or your brown fabric, you're gonna cut your A template pieces and your B template pieces. Okay, for the A template, this one, the smaller little triangle, you're gonna cut 3 strips that are 2 inches wide, and from those 2 strips you're going to cut 48 pieces. Now depending on how wide your fabric is, we're all using different fabric and different manufacturers make their fabric different widths. Okay, so mine was 43 inches wide, and when I cut my 48 pieces, I had a good little chunk left over. I went ahead and cut extras. So when I'm done, I'm going to have some extra A pieces that we're going to save for later, right? We see all these empty places in here. If you have extras, save them in a little baggie. Now your B template is the bigger triangle, and you need 72 of those for this week. So if you cut 4 strips that are 2 1/4 inches wide, from those 4 strips you can cut 72 pieces, and you're not really going to have much left over if your fabric is 43 inches wide. Now I did make a little note here because last week I had you cut 2 strips for the 2.5 inch squares from the dark red fabric, right? And some of you used part of the second strip, and some of you didn't have to use that second strip at all, and you were wondering what to do with it. Just save it if you have extra strips left over. Again, depending on how wide your fabric is, you might have needed to cut into that second strip, and you might not have had to need to cut into it. Just save it, put it aside with clue number 2, right? But yeah, you may or may not have had to use that second fabric or second strip, depending on how wide your fabric is. All right, so then we're going to take a look at, so that is, the PDF for this is called the Instructions and Templates. All right, so that's the first PDF. There's a second PDF for your paper foundations, right? So you need to grab both PDFs and print them off, and your paper foundations, you're going to print 4 copies for a total of 24 units each. So you have on the first page, you have units that look like this. On your second page, you have units that look like this. There's 6 on each page. If we print 4 copies, that's going to give you 24 of each unit, right? And these are printed on newsprint, so you see the difference in the color. But you will clearly see a tonal difference between these sections and this section. Everywhere that is darker, you're going to use the brown fabric. And all the areas that are lighter, that's where we're going to use the background fabric, okay? And plus, they're marked with the template that you're using, right? So that's like a second backup of telling you what fabrics go where. Now, one thing I wanted to do is just give you some measurements, because not only do you have the 1-inch print box down in the corner that you can check to make sure that everything is printing out the right size, I wanted to give you a couple of other measurements just in case you wanted to know how big these pieces needed to be. Now, page 2 of your foundations looks like this, right? One of the things I love about paper piecing is when you start getting some smaller units or even bigger units that don't exactly come to like an even rounded number, like 2.5, 3.5, 2 inches, 3 inches. If you were to measure this inside square, you would see it's like 1 5/8 or something like that. It's kind of a difficult number to measure for. So we don't have to worry about cutting all of those weird measurements. We cut out our templates, which are bigger, at easy measurements to measure for. But when we're done paper piecing, our pieces finish at these wonky little measurements, right? So how I measured the paper foundation on page 2 is from this very corner here, this inside corner, to this inside corner. And that measurement straight across is 4.5 inches. Okay? If I were to measure from here to there, it's a little funny measurement. So diagonally from that corner to that corner, 4.5 inches. On page 1, these templates were a little bit easy to measure if you want to just double check those. From the outside line here to the outside line there is 2.5 inches. And from the flat part right here, outside line, to this outside line is 3.5 inches. So if you want to just double check, but usually the 1-inch print box works perfectly. And again, make sure you're choosing actual size or 100% when you're printing off your clues. So here we are, 4 copies. That's what, 8 pages of newsprint with all of my pieces. And I went ahead and just cut out one of each. And we're going to walk through the paper piecing of both of these units here in this video. And yeah, and then you'll only have what, 46 left to go. So let me just move these out of the way because I'll be coming back to them not today, but possibly tomorrow. All right, and I just have all of my pieces here. I have my little glue stick. I have my 1/4 inch ruler. I do have a little bit of a bigger ruler that's got some grippies on it. This is a Creative Grids ruler. I'm going to use this to square up and trim all the extra fabric up at the end. I have my rotary cutter, and I have my light pad. It does have the self-healing mat on the top, so I can cut right on this light pad. And I have my sewing machine all set up, and the stitch length I've chosen is a 1.0. You might have to adjust your machine there. I feel like I've been talking a lot. Are you ready to start sewing? Okay, like I mentioned, the good news is we don't have to tape together any units this week, right? And they're small, and I think they're gonna go by pretty quick, even though you have 24 of each to sew. So let's get this party started. I'm going to turn on my light pad here and just checking to see that you can see everything. Let's start with this one right here. Okay, we're going to start right here, and we see the sewing order is 1st, 2nd, and 3rd fabrics we're adding. These are using the B template, so let's just grab 2 of those. There's the B. And 1C fabric. Let's grab that one. So there's my fabrics for this unit. And what else? I wanted to let you know that the order that I have chosen to sew my pieces together is just a recommendation. On this particular unit, you could start with your C piece right in the middle and then add the 2 ends if you want to. I'm just going to keep the same order that I have on this clue, and we're going to flip this right over, and you can just see right through there. And I'm going to take my fabric here, and I want you to note, all right, you can see this just barely right through there on the screen, right? The long side of your triangle is right there. So I'm just going to get my fabric situated so the long part of the triangle is like right there. And I like to use a little glue. Y'all know me. I'm just going to center this fabric so that it extends beyond the paper edge and just beyond that sewing line between B and C. Well, I need to scoot it over a little bit more. There we go, and I'm going to finger press that fabric right into the glue. And let's just double check from the other side and make sure that that fabric goes beyond all the paper edge, right? And it just does go beyond that sewing line right there between 1 and 2. All right, and so C is easy. It's just a square. So the hardest part for me is making sure I'm putting the right side of the fabric down. So we have the fabric right side facing up, and we're going to flip right side facing down and just line up our fabrics like that. Now I'm going to switch the screen to this screen. So I don't have to keep going back and forth, right? And I'm hoping you can see everything pretty well. We're going to come right over here to the sewing machine, and I'm just pinching my fabrics in place, right, just like this, so they don't move. And I'm going to start sewing right off the paper edge and right off the paper edge, right on that line. Okay, we're going to come back here. That first thread is always a long one. And let's go ahead and fold this paper back and just trim anything that is extra beyond 1/4 inch, which that is just 1/4 inch for the way I placed them. So we're good. We don't have to trim that. I'm going to add a little bit of glue right into position number 2, and we're going to fold that fabric over. And I forgot my seam roller, so I'm going to use my fingernail, which works just as good. And we're finger pressing so that that fabric behaves and stays nice and flush with that paper. Alright, now I want to show you all this. This is the right side of the fabric, right? When we flip it over and we place it down on the light pad, we see that this background fabric extends way beyond the next sewing line. See how much further it goes, right? We're going to keep that in mind when we're placing the third fabric, and we don't have to line it up to this edge here on the fabric. Just because that fabric extends doesn't mean that's where we have to line up our fabric. And one reason I'm doing it this way is because, like this week, we have 48 clues to sew, right? You could fold this back right on that line and trim that, and if that helps you, by all means do it. But when we're doing 48 clues in a week, I find that it's much faster to just leave that extra and pay attention to it, right? When we line up our fabric this time, if I hold it up off of the light pad, I can just see that placement line, right? Another thing to pay attention to is the long side of the triangle is going like that. Get your triangle fabric ready so that your long piece is like that. This is the edge that we are lining up, okay? So it's going to go over just like this. See that? See that extra fabric? That's going to get trimmed up here in a second. But when we flip this over, we can lay this down, and you'll see my brown fabric goes beyond that line. See that? I'm hoping you can see that on the screen. There's my brown fabric line right there. We don't have to line it up to that edge up there. Alright, so let's bring this over and sew that one. Now we're going to come back and we're going to flip up that paper, and now we can trim away all of this extra there and leave that 1/4 inch. We're going to flip it over, add a smidgen of glue, and flip that fabric right on over. And rub that fabric right in the glue. And now you'll see Even though I've been paper piecing a lot, you'll see my fabric just does come down to the very tip here and barely makes it along the paper edge there, right? As long as that fabric at least comes to the edge of your paper, you're good, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just trim up all of the extra fabric all the way around. It's just 3 pieces for this unit. I'm matching up the 1/4 inch mark to that inside line right there. I do think that this would go by much faster if you were to chain piece your pieces or do like 5 at a time, right? And then trim 5 at a time. I tend to like working in groups like that. And right over here, I have a little smidgen of fabric. I'm going to go ahead and just trim that up right to the paper foundation. And then there is my finished unit. Let me turn this off for a second. See that? I do have a little tiny tip of fabric that doesn't quite make it. That's going to be in my seam allowance, so I'm going to call this unit good. It's just a smidgen. So I'm going to call this unit good. My hope is that the fabric, I line it up so that the fabric goes all the way to the edge. But if I just have that much missing, I'm saying we're all good, right? That's going to be in the seam allowance, and it's just a tiny, tiny little bit. All right, so that is that unit right there. I only have 23 left to make. And now we're going to come over to this unit right here, and we're going to flip this with the right side facing down. Now on this unit, you'll see I did start right here in the center because these are smaller little triangles on this unit, right? So I thought it would be easier if we start with the square in the middle and then do the other 3 pieces. So we're going to start here and then add 2 and 3 and then 4. So let's flip that over. I'm going to add a little bit of glue right in that first position. And our first fabric is always placed with the right side facing up. So just centered right over top. See how it goes over that paper edge? Right there. Now I will say that I hope the light pad hasn't confused you, but I cannot imagine having to pre-fold all of the 48 templates to not use the light pad. So for me, I'm finding it a lot faster and pretty helpful. All right, let's flip that over. We're going to be using 2 A units. So let's bring over those fabrics first. There's my little A triangles. We'll flip this over, but I want you to see the longer side of that triangle is connected to that square. So short side, long side. So it's going to be just like that, right? We're going to flip this over. Let me turn that up just a little bit more. And right side up, turning right side down. And I can see it here in person, although the light always messes with the camera. I'm just going to scoot that brown fabric up just a smidgen above that sewing line. See that? So I do have some white fabric sticking out just like that. And if we turn it over and we place it down on our light pad, we can see that shadow, right? That darker shadow. The brown fabric is going over just a little bit beyond the sewing line. So let's bring this over and sew our first seam for this unit. We're going to come back and flip the paper over, and we're going to trim up this extra fabric. We're going to turn it back over so the fabric is facing up. And I add a little smidgen of glue right there, and we're going to fold that fabric right on over. And I'm just going to finger press that seam and finger press the fabric into the glue. I feel like I repeat the same things over and over, but sometimes it's helpful to do that. Now see, the brown fabric extends way beyond the paper's edge. That's awesome. We're going to go over here to position number 3. So on this one, the long side of the triangle again is right next to the square, so our triangle sits just like that. Let's flip this over, right side facing down, and you can just see it on the camera. I see it in person, the sewing line right there. We're going to extend the brown fabric up just a little bit above that line. And then you can double check it by just turning this right over and seeing that shadow right through that paper there. Now let's bring this over to the sewing machine. So we're going to come back, let's flip up that paper's edge, and we've sewn through that little seam allowance there, so you might have to rip the paper just a little bit to get it to come back over. See that? Let's trim away this extra, and then we're going to flip it over and add a little bit of glue right there. And flip that brown fabric right on over, and I'm just really finger pressing that seam. Especially right here where these two come together, because you're going to have a little bit of thickness in that seam. That's absolutely normal, right? But we have our little tip there, and what's awesome is when we square up this unit, our tip will be down here, and we're going to have our 1/4 inch seam allowance right there, right? Okay, so there's the first 2 pieces we've added. Let's come down to here, and for position number 4, we're going to use a B fabric. And I want you to pay attention to the orientation of this triangle. The long side of the triangle is here, short side, short side. So it's different, right, than the other two. The long side is along this edge. So let's go ahead and orientate our triangle just like that, right? Or like this, because we have to flip it over, right? There's the long side of our triangle right there. Long side of our fabric. So when we flip it right side down, this is the edge that gets flipped over just like that. See that? There's extra white fabric right there. That's okay. We're going to trim that off, and we can just double check by flipping it over, and I see that shadow underneath the paper. You might have to hold it up to another light. I don't have this on the brightest as it goes, because then it's just going to glow for the camera and everything's going to be hard to see. But you can still see the shadow, right? Let's bring this over to the sewing machine. So just 4 pieces of fabric make up this unit. Let's flip over, and again, we've sewn through that paper, so you might have to tear it just a little bit to get it to fold over. We're going to trim off the extra fabric there. We're going to flip it back over, add a little bit of glue, and fold that fabric right on over. Now what's really awesome about cutting your pieces from strips like what we have been doing is, even though I've allowed a little bit of extra to have some extra play when placing these fabrics, right? I think that makes it a little bit easier, but we're really only wasting just small little slivers of fabric, right? That's from our seam allowances and trimming up clue number 1. We're going to go ahead and clean up and square up this unit as well. So let's turn that off. See how the fabric extends beyond the paper's edge? Let's go ahead and trim away all the extra fabric there. Again, I think it would be pretty quick just to work like in a little assembly line. Doing little batches, right? I think that tends to go by a lot faster. Some of you are going to be like so excited we have 48 units this week. Some of you are going to be like, oh no, we have 48 units this week. If the thought of 48 units is daunting, break it up into little batches and work a little bit here and a little bit there, and you'll breeze through it before you know it. Now there is a little bit of fabric that extends beyond that paper template. See that little tip right there on that piece? I'm going to go ahead and square it up. It only takes a second. That extra little bit of fabric at this point in the game, this unit's going to be sewn to another unit down the way, and that extra bit might be in one of your seam allowances, so it's probably good to go ahead and just square it up just like that. I don't even use the ruler, I just freehand and trim it to the paper. So there is that finished unit, right? And so again, the awesome thing about paper piecing is I didn't have to be so exact with these little triangles, and I have my extra fabric in the seam allowance there, and I have my extra fabric in the seam allowance there, so that when this unit gets sewn to something else, I'm not going to lose the little tips of my square there. It's going to stay perfect, right? Isn't that awesome? So there we go. There's all the extra fabric from 2 units. And here are our 2 different foundations that we are sewing this week. Pretty easy, right? You can do this. I have full confidence that you can absolutely do this. Now, if we were just patchwork sewing and you were to tell me that you just recently started making quilts and sewing, I would be a little concerned about at least these little parts right here. But with paper piecing, it makes it such a breeze that I dare say a beginner could do this. You could absolutely do this, right? All right, so I just have 23 more units of this and 23 more units of that to make, and clue number 3 will be done. Right? So let's come back here. I hope you have so much fun with this. And if you have any questions, feel free to jump down to the comment section. And as always, I invite you to step out of your comfort zone and to share your work with us over on the Creative Crew. Now, if you have Facebook and you haven't ever joined us there, there's a link for Creative Crew down in the description box. I try to put all kinds of links that might be helpful down there. If you don't do Facebook and you have a question and want to reach out to me, a link to my Etsy shop is there, and you can send me a message over on Etsy, okay? Trying to think of what else. Oh, our chicken babies. They have tripled in size. They're getting little feathers on their wings. They are amazing. They are just growing so fast. Our little babies are growing so fast. They're stinky, y'all. Chickens stink. But when the weather is like 70 during the day, they go outside during the day, which is so helpful. At night, we bring them back in. They have a coop outside that keeps them safe, so they're not just free roaming out there, y'all. And then we have a brooder inside that keeps them all nice and warm in the evening. But when they're in, they're stinky little birds. But they're so adorable. They're so dang cute. And I didn't take any video of them this week, so I will try to give you a video update at the end of next week. And yeah, I hope you have so much fun with this. Have fun sewing, and I will see you next Friday. Bye, everybody.